You know, I'm really starting to hate the term RPG. I can't think of any other genre that is as vague or up to interpretation as RPG is. Because how do we actually define RPG? If we're going strictly off the name, it just means role-playing game, which could be attached to any game ever. And if we're talking in terms of XP progression or loot or customization or side quests, well, a bunch of other genres can have that as well. So I tend to find that RPG tends to be a quote-unquote genre that you need to pair with something else to actually get a concrete category for a game. FPS RPG like Destiny 2, or turn-based action RPG like older styles of Final Fantasy, or real-time action RPG like Final Fantasy 16, because the combat takes place in real time, is action forward, and you play the role of Clive. But if we want to dig into the weeds a bit further and try and see how much Final Fantasy 16 actually stacks up against the common consensus on what an RPG entails, well, let's do that. Because I've seen a bunch of, quite honestly, weird criticism concerning this game that I think just doesn't help either side of the debate. Whether you are looking forward to Final Fantasy 16 like I am or completely turned off by it, having useful and constructive thought-out criticism is all good and healthy, but it must be accurate if it's going to be actually useful, whether to Square Enix or to other consumers. So let's talk about whether or not FF16 falls in line with the general idea of an RPG. And if you've seen any gameplay ever shown of Final Fantasy 16, you probably have a good sense for what the combat is going to be like. Combo-oriented, real-time, fast-paced action, where you are weaving between various summons or icon loadouts to utilize different abilities and utilities to deal with any given situation. That's for standard Clive-based combat. And side note, you may hear me say Clive-based a bit too much from here on out, but I kinda like the term, so I'm gonna stick with it. And for the icon battles, they vary based on what you're fighting. Some are side-scrollers, some seemingly go full Star Fox, some are fighting game-esque. Titan is just 5'11" for the 6 foot. And when it comes to gameplay styles, there's seemingly a decent enough spread from what we have been shown so far. Just nothing turn-based which will appeal or not appeal to certain people. But that's all well and good. But when we think of traditional RPGs or even Final Fantasy RPGs, I doubt Devil May Cry combat is our first guess. So what about it makes it RPG-esque? Well, I'd argue the progression and customization. When I think of the term RPG, I rarely ever think of the actual combat, but the stuff surrounding that combat. XP, loot, progression, that kind of stuff. They've shown that we can equip Clive with various weapons and upgrade them as well, using various resources that we find. We also have a talent system similar in style to Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's composed of various cores or sections containing talents that you can pick. Essentially, each icon you acquire has its own little selection of talents and abilities you can choose from to modify the abilities you get from that icon in the Clive-based combat sections. Yeah, it's straightforward, and at least from the sounds and looks of it, so far, but when paired with the combo system and pace of the actual combat, I kind of lean towards the idea of simplicity reigning supreme here. Final Fantasy has rarely ever invested in thought-out and developed talent trees, with the closest analog probably being Final Fantasy X's Sphere Grid. And I quite like the core system in 7 Remake. It was simple, and I could honestly go for a bit more, but it was a decent enough time where it doesn't pose a big distraction for me. And if we actually get interesting abilities or choices in Final Fantasy 16, instead of the dull and sleep-inducing plus 15 attack, plus 15 defense, poggers. Oh, this one has plus 7 magic defense. Oh, wow. You know, that entire snooze fest that was the Final Fantasy VII Remake's talents. Then I think the system could genuinely bring something great to the table here, and I want to get my hands on these abilities and their talents to try different combinations. That's where the real fun in this system will lie for me. The synergies with other abilities and other icons, and what different combinations in the talents that I can choose to use on my own volition to make combos that I want. And there are two aspects to this game that we just have not seen all that much of, and that is the side content and what the end game will be like. I like having optional content to do that I can take and consume at my own pace, but making that side content engaging and not just feel like an unofficial time pad will be important to me. Inject story into these quests, let the side content expand the world and characters in there to make each region and cast of characters more compelling and engrossing. Reward the time that I'm putting into the system, and don't just use the side quests as a glorified excuse to extend playtime and give XP to players to outlevel various sections of the main story. Don't just have quests that amount to little more than Go kill 5 wolves, go collect 5 roses. Be creative, expand on them, flesh them out, flesh the world out. I know they can do it because they did it in Final Fantasy XIV. Where the side quests aren't mandatory to enjoy the game, but if you take the time to stop and smell the roses, there are some really nice moments to be had there. Heck, Final Fantasy XV had some filler quests, don't get me wrong, but there were some genuinely great moments in that side content as well. The one that I always remember is the Cup Noodle quest. Yeah, I got memed on because it's an obvious advertisement, but they had fun with it, and went over the top, and I found it funny. I hope we don't get more blatant advertisement like that, but the ability to have memorable moments in that side content will really make or break a large chunk of the game for me. Don't be afraid to inject some whimsical sections there as well. The game has freaking Moogles, for Christ's sake. It's almost impossible not to have something whimsical with them. But if they can nail the side quest content, then that would be another pillar that many people associate with RPGs checked off. We know it exists, but the quality of it is in question right now. I also agree with Jesse Cox in this idea that what I largely associate with RPGs is the feeling of the world, story, and music. The stuff that essentially sucks me, into this world and makes me want to learn more about it and to explore various components. And this leads into the section of the game I'm still the most cautious about. The world. And no, not the design of it, but I sincerely hope it's not just a bunch of empty space with the occasional mob thrown around, or to put a side quest objective somewhere off in the distance, or to just incentivize using the chocobo. Give me reason to explore these sections of the overall world. Treasures, loot, collectibles, or even some kind of dynamic events or side quests that I can find by going off the beaten path and naturally discovering them. They don't need to be freaking everywhere, but at least common enough for me to think that if I go left instead of right here, I may find something different. It's not an open world game, but with the size of some of these areas, especially the desert section, let them feel like a world that has people in it and not just a video game level. So while there are some elements that are still up in the air that I feel need some clarification for, I still feel that making the argument that Final Fantasy XVI isn't an RPG is just making a disingenuous argument, more than anything practically useful or constructive. Preferring turn-based or preferring a different style of real-time combat is fine, it's all well and good. Not liking the direction they're going is also fine. But trying to say that the game isn't an RPG, when from all that we have seen, it has pretty much all the parts that most people associate with RPGs, at least colloquially, and still saying it's not an RPG, it's just not helping anyone's case. Personally, I'm very optimistic, at least where the main story is concerned, from what we have seen so far, but we need to see or play more to properly judge, well, one, the story, but also the game itself. I haven't seen anything so far from what was shown to suggest that the game isn't an RPG, just that there is particular emphasis on the action side of things. RPG is a vague term at best and comes in many different styles, and whether a particular flavor of RPGs to your liking depends on subjective taste. And whether or not Final Fantasy XVI lands with you or not will depend on the state and the quality of the final product. However, in terms of critiquing overall direction choices for Final Fantasy going forward, whether or not you want to see more games like this or less games like this and go back to a more traditional turn-based style of RPG, useful, beneficial, constructive criticism is important. Because if the argument comes from a place of disingenuousness, then no one will take it seriously. And if the goal is to convey useful, practical information to the consumer, or to other consumers as to whether or not they should buy or not buy a particular product, then accurate, clear information is paramount. So yes, while there are still things that you could be critical of, or pessimistic of, or even optimistic like I am, in regards to Final Fantasy XVI, I don't think whether or not the game should be categorized as an RPG is one of them. But whether or not it's an RPG that's up your alley or not, that's a different question. So thank you all for tuning in, my pleasure making the video. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And hit the bell icon to be notified for when I upload in the future, because you bet I'll be playing this game on day one when it releases. And leave a comment down below with the aspect of Final Fantasy XVI you are most looking forward to. Whether or not it's just about finding out something about the story, or testing out various gameplay mechanics, or the combo system, or just vistas, or music, or the dog. I think those are all equally valid. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day. Go play some video games if you can. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.